Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh. No story in the year 2022 has been reported in greater detail or in more depth than the war in Ukraine. And yet there is one vital element that has stayed under the radar: the role of one man and his private company in helping Ukraine match the Russian offensive on the battlefield. I'm talking about Elon Musk and his private company Starlink. From the outset, Russia has systematically targeted Ukraine's critical infrastructure. From airfields to military installations to even Ukrainian nuclear power plants, which Moscow has sought to occupy to deny the Ukrainian people their source of power. But one of the lesser reported aspects is the manner in which the Ukrainian war has been fought not just on the ground, but also in space. In the last week of February, Viasat, which happens to be one of the world's biggest commercial satellite operator, experienced a network outage that impacted several countries in Europe, especially Ukraine. A number of Ukrainian banks and government websites were struck. Russia was blamed for the incident, as Moscow is said to have decades of experience in targeting satellite communication systems, although no concrete evidence has been put forth so far. On the 1st of March, Elon Musk Starlink entered into the Ukrainian war zone. Contrary to Russian designs, Ukrainian civilians and its military did not suffer an internet blackout. Starlink, with its present constellation of over 3,000 satellites that zip past the Earth at an altitude of about 328 to 614 kilometers in low Earth orbits, ensured that the Ukrainian military stayed connected throughout. Elon Musk Starlink has plans of expanding the network of satellites to about 12,000 or even 42,000 in the course of the next decade. Starlink provides data transfer that is said to be 10 times faster than other commercial satellite systems. Now, Starlink's antenna contraption is simple, but its impact on the war was almost immediate. In the very first week of Russia's invasion, Moscow laid siege on Kiev. A 40-mile-long convoy of Russian armor crowded at the gates of Kiev. The war was expected to be over in a matter of days. But Ukraine had a surprise weapon. Backed by satellite communication systems, the Turkish-made TB2 Bayraktar drones, which had earned their spurs in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 2020, devastated the Russian armor. Moscow, which wanted to smash through the Ukrainian defenses with the use of tanks, IFVs, howitzer guns and multiple launch rocket systems, suddenly found that these tactics of war on their own were highly inadequate in the 21st century. It is this moment in the Russia-Ukraine war that heralded the age of drones along with communication and surveillance satellites in modern warfare. The remote-controlled unmanned medium-altitude TB2 Bayraktar drones were able to run circles around the Russian forces. By the 2nd of April, Russia was forced to lift the siege of Kiev. The Russian armor was redirected to Donbas, where Moscow regrouped its forces after having learnt a bitter lesson. But Russia was also quick to up its game. Moscow recognized that in Ukraine, electronic warfare is going to be the decisive factor. Surveillance, tracking enemy positions, scrubbing through the skies using radars and satellites for missiles, fighter jets and attack drones is the difference between victory and defeat. The surprise factor and advantage of drones that Ukraine held in the siege of Kiev were nullified by Russia in Donbas by its own use of radars and jamming devices. This video was released by the Ukrainian Defense Ministry. It captures the moment that a Ukrainian drone filmed itself being shot down by a Russian anti-air defense missile. You must watch it again to understand the high-tech weapons that are at play at this moment in Ukraine. Before the Ukrainian counteroffensive began in September, Russia was able to field at least about 10 big artillery guns for every artillery gun that Kiev had at its disposal. Western military aid came in the form of HIMARS, the M777 howitzer guns, anti-tank weapons and also anti-air defense systems. But according to experts, without Starlink's constellation of satellites, which have allowed the Ukrainian soldiers to track Russian positions with pinpoint accuracy, these weapon systems would not have given the Ukrainians the blitzkrieg advantage which Kiev enjoyed in the period between September and October, reclaiming large swathes of its lost territory.
Слава богу, у нас эти Starlink'и выручают.
Что-то, блядь, магическое, реально.
Это вообще волшебство. Starlink — это, по сути, единственная ниточка связи с внешним миром, потому что...
Зручно, швидко, це ще й безпечно, тому що це...
Супер вещь, отличная связь в самых недоступных местах.
Завжди є зв'язок з рідними, з побратимами.
Сделан как для военных, у него один провод в розетку вставил.
Russia relies on its GLONASS system for communication and surveillance. But these satellites, which are 24 in number, are simply no match for the 3,000 low Earth orbit constellation of Elon Musk. In fact, Elon Musk, who at the time was the world's richest man, even proposed a peace deal, categorically stating that as neither side was willing to climb down the escalation ladder, this conflict could potentially end up being a nuclear war. Elon Musk, in fact, put out a peace plan in the form of a Twitter poll. Musk wanted fresh elections in the annexed regions of Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson and Zaporizhia to know the will of the people. Crimea was to be formally ceded to Russia with an assured water supply. And Ukraine would have to agree to be a neutral nation without being a part of the NATO military alliance. Volodymyr Zelensky, who's fighting this war with American weapons, was apoplectic. The American defense manufacturing complex, which is minting billions of dollars out of the Ukraine war, lampooned the idea. One can dismiss the maverick billionaire as someone who lacks a politician's knowledge of geostrategy and the long game of alliance building. But Elon Musk did touch on the nub of what is at stake. Ukraine shares very close cultural and historical linkages with Russia. By seeking to bring Ukraine under its umbrella of a hostile NATO military alliance, the United States has opened the lid of the Pandora's box in eastern Ukraine. So the question is this: when the fighting stops and when there is finally peace, how different will the settlement look from the one that has been proposed by Elon Musk? The waters of the Pacific are churning with a new conflict. 2022 has been the year when the Taiwan Strait has witnessed its worst crisis so far. It is hard to predict at what point and with what casus belli will a conflict break out in this region. But what is clear is that there cannot be two suns shining brightly over the horizon of the Pacific. And sooner rather than later, the United States and China will get into a head-butting contest for the dominance of the Asia-Pacific.
With an unprecedented third term, President Xi Jinping is the most powerful leader to have emerged in China after Mao Zedong. But Xi Jinping is also a man on a mission. And what he does in China and in the Taiwan Strait may end up as the defining moment of this decade. When Nancy Pelosi landed in Taipei on the 2nd of August to honor, as she put it, America's unwavering commitment to supporting Taiwan's vibrant democracy, what she ended up doing was to give China the excuse to conduct the biggest military drills in the Taiwan Strait. Beijing immediately imposed a sea and air blockade on Taiwan, an autonomously governed island which China considers as a renegade breakaway province. Shipping lanes were disrupted, air traffic was brought to a standstill. Testing Taiwan's air preparedness is nothing new. As part of grey zone tactics, Chinese fighter jets repeatedly violate Taiwan's air defense identification zone. But this time around, even ballistic missiles were fired around Taiwan's coast. Xi Jinping has never minced his words on Taiwan. He has repeatedly exhorted the People's Liberation Army to prepare for war and has threatened to unify Taiwan by force if needed. On the other hand, the American President Joe Biden has more than once committed to defending Taiwan in case of a Chinese invasion.
Are you willing to get involved militarily to defend Taiwan if it comes to that?
Yes,
You are.
that's the commitment we made.
But defending Taiwan is not going to be straightforward for the United States. Since 2015, China has expanded its naval strength at a furious pace and has built the world's biggest navy. Even military generals within the United States agree that China will overmatch the US presence in West Pacific by 2024. And the United States will end up losing any war fought in the Pacific with China. To create further deterrence, China is also expanding the number of nuclear warheads at its disposal from 400 nuclear warheads in 2022 to 1,500 nuclear warheads by 2025. A war in the Taiwan Strait will be a global catastrophe. As the chip manufacturing hub of the world, Taiwan's importance cannot be overemphasized. A disruption of Taiwan's semiconductor chip supplies means a recession unlike any that we have witnessed in our lifetime.
"2022 has been a momentous year in Iranian history. The Women, Life, Freedom protest movement emerged as the most dominant political movement of the year. Triggered by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini on the 16th of September, the nationwide protests are still going strong. For the first time in decades, the iron grip of the Ayatollahs on the reins of power in Tehran has been challenged. In fact, these protests go far beyond the issue of hijab and have in fact been described as a nascent counter-revolution.
In September of 1978, Tehran was rocked by major demonstrations. Protesters defied the martial law and took to the streets to oppose the autocratic and corrupt rule of Shah Mahmoud Reza Pahlavi. The Shah alleged that the protests were foreign instigated, but the strikes and demonstrations continued, paralyzing the country. Protests reached a crescendo when rioting broke out in Tehran on the 26th of January 1979, after the airport was closed down. To prevent the arrival of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini from Paris, crowds were livid by the attempts of the government to keep out the man they had begun to view as their new leader. The army clamped down, killing at least 40 protesters on the 28th of January. The following day, troops again opened fire on demonstrators who had set fire to a number of buildings. But by February, the protests, which had turned into a revolution, toppled the Shah of Iran. And now, more than 4 decades later, Iran is once again in the grip of widespread protests. Sparked by the death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini, many commentators, especially in the West, say Iran is in the grip of a counter-revolution.
I think this is just the beginning. For 43 years, the people of Iran have been oppressed, and now they're coming together as never before for the rights of women. This is a moment in history, and we are all rallying behind them. Not just Iranians, but people of the world are rallying behind this topic because we want freedom for the people of Iran.
Mahsa Amini, a Kurdish Iranian, died on the 16th of September after falling into a coma after she had been detained by Iran's notorious morality police. Iranian police rejected social media accusations that she was beaten in custody and consequently died. The protest began in Mahsa Amini's hometown of Saqqez and then spread to other provinces like wildfire. Videos of women chopping off their hair and burning their headscarves began to go viral. The protests are seen as an expression of the Iranian society that is increasingly alienated from its theocratic system of government. There was pent-up anger over economic hardships and social restrictions. The protests are unprecedented in terms of scale, spread across provinces, social classes, and ethnic groups. Though there have been protests before, people this time round are openly calling for an end of the theocratic regime. Banners of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei have been set on fire. Women have openly walked down the streets without headscarves in show of defiance. Demonstrators have taken on the security forces with a vengeance. Iran, though, has labelled the protests as riots and has blamed its arch rivals, the United States and Israel, for stoking disturbances across the country. The exiled Kurdish Iranian groups in Iraq have been targeted with repeated missile and drone attacks. But with protesters not willing to relent, Tehran has promised to disband the morality police. But the protesters haven't been let off the hook. An estimated 488 protesters have been killed. While over 20,000 protesters, most of them students, barely out of their teens or in their early 20s, have been arrested. Protesters have been publicly hung from a crane after shoddy trials, and human rights activists warn of more executions. It is difficult to predict how these protests will end, but what is clear is that there is deep-seated anger among the Iranian people against their government, and for the Iranian nation, there is no going back.
The three Central American nations of El Salvador, Honduras and Guatemala are known as the Triangle of Death. The region is plagued by murderous gangs that control drug trafficking and organized crime. Extortion, abductions, gang-related murders and crippling poverty has forced thousands of people to flee from their countries. In the year 2022, a national emergency has in fact been imposed by the nations in the Triangle of Death to curtail the menace of the powerful street gangs. Our next report gets you the details.
Honduras has implemented a new plan to combat extortion by powerful street gangs. Talking tough, the first female president of Honduras, Xiomara Castro, has declared a national security emergency on the 24th of November. The police has been ordered to move into villages and neighborhoods which have been taken over by the criminal gangs. The scourge of kidnappings and extortion is so widespread that some businesses and people pay a daily extortion fee called war tax to step out of their homes. According to the Insight crime think tank, the Mara Salvatrucha, or MS-13, is the most notorious street gang in the Western Hemisphere. The extortion industry in the Triangle of Death is estimated to be at least $1.1 billion annually. In neighboring El Salvador, the country isn't much different. President Nayib Bukele declared a state of emergency on the 24th of March this year. The trigger point was the violence between March 25th and 27th that had claimed 87 lives. The nationwide state of emergency was imposed, which allows for indefinite detention, even without court order. Since March, more than 58,000 suspected gang members have been arrested. The gangs of El Salvador boast of 70,000 members in their ranks. But humanitarian groups have questioned the heavy-handed tactics being deployed. Mass roundups have been questioned even as innocent young men based on their appearance, age, or where they live have been arrested. Chronic violence, coupled with lack of economic opportunities, has sparked an exodus of people towards the United States through Mexico. On an average, over 400,000 people have left annually from the Triangle of Death in recent years. The journey is very treacherous and often ends up being the last one, undertaken by desperate people who have been thrust into very desperate circumstances.
Common, innocent people who are unfortunate enough to be caught up in a war zone have their lives crushed at a moment's notice. But then, there are those for whom war is a business. I'm talking about the defense manufacturers and contractors who rub their fingers in glee as tensions escalate and the first bullets are fired. While the rest of the world has been paralyzed by a cost of living crisis in 2022, The defense manufacturing companies are counting their profits because business has perhaps never been this good. In the Russia-Ukraine war that has dragged on since February, an estimated 100,000 soldiers are said to have died on each side. 5 times that number are said to have suffered some serious injuries. But for the merchants of death, the defense companies and the contractors, the war has come as a godsend, an opportunity of a lifetime to mint the next billion. As the common people mourn their kin who've been killed in a war, the defense companies and contractors are laughing their way to the bank. Defense manufacturing is said to be a $2 trillion industry. The shares of these defense companies are traded in the top stock exchanges of the world. People who invest in these companies are only hungry for profits, and need we say that the Ukraine war has helped them earn some very handsome profits in the year 2022. These are the top defense manufacturers from the United States. The share price of Lockheed Martin, the company that manufactures the F-35 fighter jets, the Javelin anti-tank missiles and the Black Hawk helicopters, the share prices since the beginning of this year have shot up by a whopping 36%. For Raytheon, which manufactures the Patriot anti-air defense missiles and the spy radar systems that are used by US destroyers, the share prices are up by about 13.99%. While in the case of General Dynamics Corporation, that manufactures the M1 Abrams tanks and the Virginia-class nuclear submarines, the stock prices have risen by over 19%. While for the British BAE Systems, the largest defense contractor in Europe, the share prices have shot up by a margin of 56%. This is a pattern that repeats in country after country for the defense corporations. There must be something soulless in counting profits that are made from the dead. So think about this. While thousands have died in wars and conflicts around the world in 2022, there are also thousands of others who have quietly minted their fortune by manufacturing weapons or by trading in the shares of these defense companies for profit. I'm your host Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.